Well, we start with something that is very easy to understand. We start with the idea that there is an interconnectedness in consciousness between all sentient beings, especially as human beings. And God, or a non-local consciousness, as we call it more objectively, is that interconnectedness. This is the easiest thing to remember. But if the tendency develops that the interconnectedness is within space, then avoid that tendency. It is an interconnectedness that transcends space and time. It's a transcendental interconnectedness, which we in quantum physics call non-local, a signal-less interconnectedness that does not require any signals, energy-carrying signal through space and time for communication. So this is the most important and most visual aspect of the new definition of God that is coming out of quantum physics. But even more evocatively, in quantum physics we look at objects as quantum possibilities, and a little bit of thinking shows us that these are quantum possibilities within this non-local consciousness for consciousness to choose from. So in this way, we have been looking for God's causation, causal power for a long time. How is it exactly that God influences the world? Now we know that how that influence occurs is through this downward causation. The choice from quantum possibilities. It is God that chooses the actual event of experience from quantum possibilities. You were asking, in other words, a modern version of Tibetan Book of the Dead,
yes,
which takes us through these borders of life and borders of death, gateways,
yes,
passageways. Yeah, surprisingly, quantum physics helps us to construct such a picture. So, at birth, but birth here is a little bit tricky, because what happens with the fetus? Now, the embryo that we are born as, that is just a single cell birth. So single cells don't carry much of what is in the previous incarnations. So there is not much ongoing continuity as of yet. But as these single cells form multiple cells and progresses a few more weeks, and the fetus starts forming with organs, gradually the vital components of the soul starts manifesting, starts being represented. The mental components of the soul do not manifest until probably the 14th or 16th week with the formation of the brain. At that point only, you can really say that the soul has started, the soul that is continuing through birth, death, rebirth cycle. That soul has fully manifested in this fetus. And that can be understood, because until the 4th month, even the brain doesn't even develop.
Yes.
And until the 6th month, really, the full-fledged developmental process of what we call a human being, a human species, a definite representative of human species, that doesn't show up until about the 6th month. So I think that is very good verification of that's when really we can say the human life begins.
Yes.
Life begins, no doubt. The single cell is also alive, and certainly life begins there, but it's not, the soul has not entered by itself. Whereas souls begin entering at a bit later, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever we say, gradually. Some of the morphogenetic fields that are involved in the vital part of the soul, that takes place in a few weeks, going to all the way to 14th week, 16th week, when even the mental part starts coming in. But a full-fledged, complete soul can be said to manifest only about 6 months. Yeah, I think that's a good number to think of.
Then what happens in the actual birth process from there?
So the actual birth process is indeed, there is in fact, many people like Steingraf talk about the birth canal experience as a traumatic change. And yes, there is good reason to think that it is a traumatic change, because the first birth is taking place in the uterus. So it is a very different environment than when again going to the birth canal and having birth in air, which is separate from mother's womb. That is a very, very difficult process that the fetus goes through. But of course, these
with
processes...
the first breath, that, for example, once you've made your appearance into the world and the first breath happens, what's happening with that non-local aspect of self?
I think the first breath is very interesting from the non-local point of view, because here was the fetus where there was no division with the consciousness of the mother. It was definitely, both of them lived literally in a symbiosis of one life, in two lives in one life. And all of a sudden, that connection is severed. So again, life begins very justifiably with that first breath. That is also completely justified because that's when individual life, separate from the mother, begins. So we are not wrong in saying that that is the birth time, the birth rate. Astrologically, that is very significant, and all that is correct, because that indeed is the beginning of the individual journey of the soul. This is very interesting, because what happens is definitely, if we watch child development, one thing is very clear: no child is born, or hardly any child. There has differences here, but majority of children certainly are not born as what is called tabula rasa. It's not an empty slate. It certainly can be a very full slate in some cases, like Mozart, but is at least substantially full for most children that grow up. So very quickly they have abilities that would take years if they would be learning from scratch to develop. So that itself shows that there must be propensities that are being reincarnated. In fact, that is one of the best evidence of reincarnation, that we come with propensities that were not learned, could not have been learned in this life. People show propensities all the time where there was no such learning process that went in this life. But nevertheless, they had that capacity. Where did it come from? So it must have come from past life. Because some people, of course, suggest that genes cause everything, but that is such a preposterous notion.